in Georgia, they lost those 2 seats. And as you said, David, they lost them after tying themselves into knots to Donald Trump. So this is going to be the question going forward. Yes, they are sticking with him because that's what the Republican base wants. But when it comes to the ballot box, he's not on there anymore. What will that mean for Republicans?
That's exactly right, which is a large part of the genesis or the impetus behind Mitch McConnell's speech today. Wolf?
All right, Dana, good work. Let's discuss the historic perspective right now. CNN presidential historians Doug Brinkley and Tim Naftali are joining us right now. Tim, this is the second acquittal for Donald Trump in a Senate impeachment trial. What's the impact of this moment? And give us the historic perspective.
Well, this is not like the acquittal that he had in 2020. In the case of this trial, the leader of Republicans in the Senate said that the House managers proved their case. Indeed, Mitch McConnell has said that former President Trump was morally and practically responsible for an insurrection, which I believe is the same as saying the seditious act. In 2020, only Mitt Romney said that the House managers had proven their case. So we have just witnessed a more bipartisan rebuke of a president than was the case a year ago. But here's the problem.
Yeah.
We are in a political crisis because we also heard from Republicans who admitted the president had engaged in a seditious act
including Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader. You know, Doug, the president was acquitted now for the second time, but this was, as Tim points out, the most bipartisan impeachment vote in history. So what effect will this have on the former president's legacy?
Well, Donald Trump's legacy is in tatters. He's beyond dented. He's wrecked. He's at 25% in the polls, but about 3/4 of the American people want nothing to do with him. It will always be known, January 6th, as the Trump insurrection. In many ways, as we're talking right now, Wolf, it's the opening salvo of insurrection studies. The House Democratic managers, particularly Jamie Raskin, did a fantastic job of setting the tone and the tenor and developing the video information of the guilt of Donald Trump. Any sane person watching what happened this week knows Donald Trump is guilty in the same way during the O.J. Simpson trial you knew they were. And there is blood on Donald Trump's hands. If you see a portrait of Donald Trump, if you don't see blood on his hands, it won't really be a portrait of him. So this is what his presidency is going to be remembered for: the double impeachments, the lackluster response to the pandemic, and the fact that he was the leader of what will be known in history as the Trump insurrection.
You know, Tim, we did have one rather surprising vote to convict Trump today. That would be Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina. Does that make him the first person to impeach a president in the House and then convict a different president in the Senate? How remarkable is that?
What's remarkable about it is the fact that Richard Burr could change his mind. Everybody, or many people, have been talking about the Belknap case. That's the last time that the Senate tried a former official. One person did change his mind, similarly, only one, though. First of all, thinking that the Senate didn't have jurisdiction, then when the Senate gave itself jurisdiction, voting on the basis of the evidence to convict Secretary Belknap. That's what Burr did this time. That shows that in his case, Senator Burr was willing to be a juror, which meant listening to the evidence and deciding on the basis of the evidence what's the right thing to do. And he did the right thing. But he's alone. He is alone because near him was Mitch McConnell, who had already decided that Donald Trump was guilty, but had also believed that he had a technical out so that he didn't have to make the tough choice. And that's the difference between Richard Burr and Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's an important difference. You know, Doug, we now have the second impeachment of former President Trump in the books, but we also still have millions of Americans out there who actually believe this big lie, see the 2020 election as a fraud. Have we ever been this divided before?
Well, not since the Civil War has our country been this divided. But, you know, we're facing an epidemic of conspiracy history. There are millions of Americans that think Neil Armstrong didn't go on the moon. There are millions of Americans that think Texas is about to break away from the Union and create its own nation. So we have an education problem in this country. We have a social media problem. And we've had a president of the United States, and Donald Trump, that promoted disunion, xenophobia, racism. And the chickens have come home to roost for our country, but also for Donald Trump. He is now a one-termer. He is an ex-president. We are going to be dealing with Joe Biden's administration. And when Merrick Garland gets confirmed, which it looks like he will as the Attorney General, very likely there will be continued investigation into Donald Trump in addition to all the cases you've been talking about on CNN, and Georgia and on and on. So Donald Trump is not out of hot water. I would not be celebrating in Mar-a-Lago here. It was a shameful performance by, I think, his defense lawyers and the House Democratic managers won the day in the court of public opinion.
Doug Brinkley, Tim Naftali, guys, thank you very, very much. And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Our coverage of today's historic impeachment trial continues next with Pamela Brown right here on CNN.
Wednesday, only on CNN. President Joe Biden, his first town hall as president. Live with Anderson Cooper. Joe Biden, a presidential town hall. Wednesday, only on CNN.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections between people, places, and projects are revolutionizing commerce in Africa.
All new Connecting Africa on CNN. In association with Afrexim Bank.
I'm Chief Executive Officer of Enigma Global Water Companies and the business of energy conservation and management services. After suffering through laryngeal cancer, so I found myself leaving England, getting back to the U.S., starting Enigma USA.
Всем привет, вы находитесь на канале Enigma, добро пожаловать. Сейчас мы видим провинцию.
From the standpoint of how well we're going to survive or thrive, but we're looking at it from the standpoint of how we can help others do the same. We're going to help primarily it's our school districts, so we focus on the areas of how we can school districts and be open, and stay open, giving teachers, staff, students, parents, all peace of mind. Stewards of the environment, but great stewards. In my case, having a voice is a feather in my cap. So hopefully this voice resonates and then folks get something positive out of this message.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Часик, вот туда идем. Это был тема климата на канале. Ага, 206. Так, мы стояли 200.
Travel the world. Make sure the world travels with you. Check in.
Log on and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
In Lagos, Nigeria, and this is CNN.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
This cannot be the future of America. We are really here because the majority in the House of Representatives does not want to face Donald Trump as a political rival in the future. His false claims about election fraud, that was the trumpet being used to inspire, instigate.
The president's remarks explicitly encouraged those in attendance to exercise their rights peacefully and patriotically.
The children of the insurrectionists, even the violent and dangerous ones, they're our children too. They are Americans and we must take care of them and their future.
The yeas are 57, the nays are 43. The Senate judges that the respondent, Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Pamela Brown in Washington. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. You're in a CNN newsroom. And just a short time ago, the Senate made history, voting to acquit Donald Trump for the second time. The shortest impeachment trial in U.S. history ended today with 57 guilty votes, 10 short of the 67 necessary for conviction, but more than expected. Among those guilty votes were 7 Republicans, making this the most bipartisan impeachment conviction vote in history. Immediately afterward, Senate leadership from both parties took to the floor.
This trial wasn't about choosing country over party, even not that. This was about choosing country over Donald Trump. And 43 Republican members chose Trump. They chose Trump.
Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot or a disgraceful dereliction of duty. We have no power to convict and disqualify a former office holder who is now a private citizen.
CNN congressional correspondent Ryan Nobles is on Capitol Hill. And Ryan, this was the expected outcome, but the final vote had a few surprises.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Pam. There's no doubt that this ended up the way that we thought it would, but the path to get to that final vote took a number of different turns that we were not expecting. It started this morning when the House impeachment manager, Jamie Raskin, suggested that they were prepared to call witnesses. And if that had happened, it would have meant that this would have been a much longer trial. It probably would have been a much more heated argument between the two sides. But after a couple of hours of negotiations, the two sides came back. They decided just to put on the record a statement by Jamie Herrera Butler about a phone call between Kevin McCarthy and President Trump on the day of the insurrection, where Trump told McCarthy that he thought that he did not care about election fraud as much as those that were rioting. Now, when it was all said and done, as you rightly point out, there were not enough votes to convict President Trump this time around, but there were a few surprises. 7 Republicans in total voting to convict the former president, including Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. And and Richard Burr of North Carolina. Their votes were significant because both of these men had earlier voted that this whole process was unconstitutional. So they switched their votes after hearing the arguments from the House impeachment managers. And then, of course, there was Mitch McConnell's speech at the end of all of this, where he blistered former President Trump and his actions on January 6th, but argued that it wasn't the responsibility of these U.S. senators to convict him after he was already out of office, but suggested that perhaps he could still be tried in a criminal court. Well, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, she was watching Mitch McConnell's comments, and she had this to say afterwards.
For him to get up there and make this indictment against the president and then say, but I can't vote for it because it's after the fact. The fact that he established that it could not be delivered before the inauguration.
Now, even though this was not the outcome that Democrats were hoping for, it is the outcome that most of them expected. And there are many here in Washington that are breathing a sigh of relief that this impeachment trial is now in the rearview mirror. It has really been a big cloud that has hovered over the beginning of the Joe Biden administration. Pam, there are many here on Capitol Hill that are ready to get to work on many things, including that COVID relief package.
And that is part of why there was such a frenzy this morning with thinking that there would be witnesses called and perhaps it could go on for weeks. So it is now over. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much for bringing us the latest there from Capitol Hill. And joining me with more on today's acquittal is Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. He's also on the Judiciary Committee. Senator Blumenthal, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Pamela. Good to be with you.
7 Republicans voted in line with you and your Democratic colleagues to convict former President Trump. What is your message tonight to those other 43 Republicans who didn't?
The vote, really the largest bipartisan vote in the nation's history in convicting a president on impeachment, attests to the irrefutable, unrefuted facts that were established. And my Republican colleagues simply decided to ignore those facts. Unfortunately, sadly, tragically for them and for the country, that vote for each of them will be a stain on their reputations for years to come, maybe their whole life's work. Donald Trump has been disgraced in the eyes of history. And I think there's still a large measure of accountability to be imposed. There are criminal investigations ongoing in Georgia, New York, and elsewhere, and we need to cooperate on a bipartisan basis to stem the tide of white supremacy and violent extremism that Donald Trump mobilized and exploited, bringing them here to Washington, riling them up to assault the halls of Congress, and even to attempt assassination against his own vice president and others of us. So I would say to my Republican colleagues, there is a lot of work to do. You have really, unfortunately, failed reprehensibly to keep your oath of office. Donald Trump failed to keep his.
And you say that there's still ways to hold him accountable. Mitch McConnell actually talked about that on the floor. We're going to get to more of what he said in a moment. Do you believe that Donald Trump should face criminal prosecution for his behavior around the January 6th riots?
I thought he should face prosecution for his obstruction of justice. As, in effect, recommended by the Mueller report, it said that he had committed that crime but couldn't be prosecuted because he was a sitting president. But for his self-aggrandizement in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, for his family separation policy at the border, for his fraudulent activities and possible violation of tax laws federally and other activities that may violate state laws in New York, he certainly ought to be held accountable there. And I believe very strongly that we need accountability in the way we govern here. Democracy had a very close call when those rioters assaulted our democracy simply to overthrow the election and retain power for Donald Trump, which was his goal. And then he reveled and delighted in the result, even though it caused very serious injuries and deaths.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is you do agree that he should face criminal prosecution. I want to talk about Senator Mitch McConnell and his statement on the floor. First slamming Donald Trump, but then claiming the Constitution didn't allow the Senate to convict him since he's out of office. Here's some of what he said.
President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty.
So as you were listening to him say this after he voted to acquit Trump, what was going through your mind?
What was going through my mind, Pamela, was one word: hypocrisy. Mitch McConnell caused the delay until after the end of Donald Trump's term of office in the trial on this impeachment by refusing to accept and schedule the articles of impeachment. So he created this fig leaf for himself, and he was the cause of that, in effect, January exception. I think that no one in America will be fooled by it.
And I just want to point out, his office says, well, he always talked about the verdict. This took 19 days of pre-trial and trial. We would have never gotten the verdict while Trump was still in office. But what do you think he was trying to accomplish by voting that Trump wasn't guilty and then lambasting him for the charge that House managers have been laying out? What do you think he was trying to do there?
In effect, have it both ways, appeal to both sides. And I think, as I said, no one in America should be fooled by it. But I do also think that most people in America saw this evidence and, in fact, should appreciate the lasting injuries that many suffered. The janitors, the maintenance folks, the journalists who lived through that trauma and had to live through it again, as well as our own staff, and of course the damage to democracy as a result of that attempt to overthrow the government, which now has caused our capital to be a kind of armed island with barbed wire and huge fences, National Guard armed with assault weapons patrolling and stationed at every entranceway, which have been reduced. The effect on the symbol of our democracy is really grave.
All right, Senator Blumenthal, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you are live in the CNN newsroom. The historic impeachment trial may be over, but Donald Trump's legal troubles are far from behind him. Our Kara Scannell is standing by with new reporting on that for us tonight. And also ahead, the CDC's long-awaited guidance on safely reopening schools, what it could mean for 99% of children in the U.S. We'll be back.
On the next Living Golf, with the sport's popularity on the rise, learn from Topgolf's CEO on how they're attracting a new audience.
We know that 51% of the people who come to the Topgolf venues across the world are non-golfers.
And hear from one of the stars of the women's game, Danielle Kang.
Moments in my life that I flash back on and think that was pretty special.
Join me, Shane O'Donoghue, on this month's Living Golf.
Saturday on CNN, in association with Golf Saudi.
This is the 100 Club, our look at companies that are 100 years old or older. The dark, cramped archives at Encyclopedia Britannica feel like hallowed ground.
We have business records and logs, minutes of boards meetings going back to the late 19th century. So it's really quite an array of a mirror, in essence, of the history of the West. Encyclopedia Britannica was founded in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1768.
In 2018, Britannica celebrated 250 years in business with a special anniversary edition, honoring the past, but still looking far to the future.
We feed off our past in order to get our momentum for the future, and that's very exciting.
and I am a senior partner at Exacta. It's a software development company based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we have 600 employees, and we provide development services around the world. And this is something that I would like to share with you. I consider one of the most remarkable experiences that we have during the pandemic. We were called by the government asking for help to build a new platform for managing the pandemic. So with a group of other companies, we have created a platform that it's called Cuidar. Cuidar is like taking care in Spanish, which is a platform that allows citizens to do self-diagnosis of coronavirus symptoms and triggering the healthcare system in order to quickly react and test people in a timely fashion. So we are convinced that technology is the most powerful tool to overcome the pandemic situation, and we all do that as a contribution for free. So from a personal standpoint, this has been one of the greatest experiences that I had the chance to work with, and probably the one that we are proudest of. So it was, really great to contribute on this pandemic situation.
Today, America the vulnerable, from the massive hacking of government agencies to the disturbing attempt to poison a Florida water treatment plant. Why is cybersecurity such a weak spot for the U.S.? Fareed Zakaria, GPS. Today. All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. In Mauritius, savvy entrepreneurs are leveraging technology to help others thrive.
It was important for us to promote Mauritius as a fintech hub.
Inside Africa, today on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
Wednesday, only on CNN. President Joe Biden, his first town hall as president. Live with Anderson Cooper. Joe Biden on the presidential town hall. Wednesday, only on CNN.
And we are following more breaking news tonight. Deputy Press Secretary at the White House, TJ Ducklo, has resigned after being suspended for threatening a reporter over a story about him. CNN White House correspondent Arlette Saenz and Chief Media Correspondent Brian Stelter joins me now. So Arlette, starting with you, what are you hearing?
Well, Pamela, we're learning that TJ Ducklo, who was the deputy press secretary over at the White House, has resigned from his position after making threatening remarks to another reporter who was working on a story about a romantic relationship he was having with a separate reporter. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki tonight released a statement saying, "We accepted the resignation of TJ Ducklo after a discussion with him this evening. This conversation occurred with the support of the White House Chief of Staff." She added, "We are committed to striving every day to meet the standards set by the president in treating others with dignity and respect." Now, Ducklo has also released a statement of his own where he said, "No words can express my regret, my embarrassment, and my disgust for my behavior. I use language that no woman should ever have to hear from anyone, especially in a situation where she was just trying to do her job." He later says, "I know this was terrible. I know I can't take it back, but I also know I can learn from it and do better." Now, these reports that he had made these threatening remarks to a female reporter came out yesterday, and the White House had said they were suspending him for 1 week without pay. And so this is a pretty quick resignation from the deputy press secretary. But one question that has still come up during this whole process is why they waited to suspend him until a story came out about it. This is something that the White House had known about for a few weeks and had been speaking with the reporters outlet that had been involved about that issue. But tonight, there is that resignation from TJ Ducklo from the White House.
Right, and especially against the backdrop, Brian, of course, of Biden saying on one of his first days in office that if he ever knew of a colleague or anyone disrespecting another colleague or someone else, that they would be fired on the spot. The White House knew about this situation since January 20th, and then he was suspended yesterday after Vanity Fair pointed out all the despicable language that he used with this female reporter, and now he is resigning. What do you make of all of this?
Right, it sure sounds like this is a situation where he was pushed, where he was shoved, or where he knew he had to leave because he had lost the support of the White House team. Biden did say very early on, if you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another person with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise I will fire you on the spot. That was Biden's commitment from day one. So unlike, of course, the former president, Biden raised the bar very, very high. And this is an early test about how the White House is actually going to handle these situations when someone does treat another person with disrespect. In this case, Vanity Fair said that TJ Ducklow said to the political reporter, I will destroy you, apparently accused her of being jealous, and so there was a lot of unacceptable behavior from him. Obviously, the relationship between reporters and PR people can be very rough and tumble, and can be very intense, but there's no excuse for misogyny. And Ducklow seems to be admitting that in his resignation statement. And this is, in some ways, the first test of the Biden White House. How are they going to handle a personnel matter? And, belatedly, after 36 hours, after 32 hours of scandal, Ducklow has resigned.
It is a test, but I mean, again, they knew for weeks what he said. They knew what was reported in the Vanity Fair article. The White House knew all of that, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Arlette. But then the public found out yesterday. Is that right, Arlette?
Yeah, that's right. The White House had been made aware of these comments that had been made, and Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, was asked about that yesterday, and she said that they had been handling it in a private matter during that period. So there was some time between that Vanity Fair article coming out and when the White House had actually learned about it that any action was taken against Ducklow.
All right, Arlette, Brian, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And stay with CNN for more breaking news coverage on Donald Trump's acquittal. A historic day here in Washington. It was the shortest impeachment trial in history, but it was not short on surprises. Former Democratic impeachment counsel Norm Eisen joins me next, as well as a former advisor to 4 presidents, David Gergen. We'll be right
back. Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections between people, places, and projects are revolutionizing commerce in Africa.
All new Connecting Africa on CNN, in association with Afrexim Bank.
I believe we have an opportunity to move towards hope because we are learning more about this criminal enterprise. My name is Lisa C. Williams. I'm a philanthropist and an advocate for survivors of human trafficking. When I look back over 22 years of when I first started working in this space, I was simply trying to find safe shelter for girls who were 10 and 11 years old who were being bought and sold on our streets. One of the things that I remember very vividly, it was a turning point in our fight for Rachel's Law, is the CNN special Children for Sale. It took something like that documentary that was hosted by Jada Pinkett Smith to wake up people and for them to want to look at it and understand what we were saying to them. And that just gave us momentum. And we took that film and we took it all over Georgia and we galvanized people around a movement that we call the I Am Rachel movement to tell them about the safe harbor law that we were trying to get passed. And 83% of Georgians said we agree that children are children and not the criminals.
Today, a dramatic final day of the second Trump impeachment trial. Impeachment manager Stacey Plaskett, Senator Chris Murphy, and Governor Larry Hogan. Plus CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. State of the Union today.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world. In London, and this is CNN.
President Trump is still liable for everything he did while he was in office as an ordinary citizen. Unless the statute of limitations is run, still liable for everything he did while he was in office. Didn't get away with anything yet.
That is the most powerful Republican in the U.S. Senate, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, saying Donald Trump, quote, hasn't gotten away with anything, as you just heard there, despite today's Senate acquittal, which McConnell supported. Let's bring in CNN reporter Kara Scannell. Kara, so the breaking news headline is Trump acquitted, but he has other legal concerns that are alive and well that you're learning about. What can you tell us?
He does, Pam, and as our colleague Caitlin Collins was reporting tonight, that Trump has privately voiced concerns about being charged in connection with the riot and insurrection on the Capitol. The Department of Justice has already charged more than 200 people in connection with the riot, and he is concerned that he could be among them. Now, he already is facing 2 other criminal investigations. In Georgia, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office opened an investigation this week. They're looking into the former president's efforts to overturn the election. Specifically, they're looking at the phone call that the then president had made to the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, in which he told him to find the votes, enough votes to overturn that. He's also facing a serious criminal investigation in New York by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They're conducting a sweeping investigation into the president's finances, looking at everything from possible violations of tax fraud, misleading lenders, as well as other schemes to defraud. Now, while those investigations could potentially, affect the former president's freedom, there are a number of other civil investigations that could affect him financially. There is the D.C. Attorney General who has filed a lawsuit against the former president in saying that he had misused funds used for the presidential inauguration, and that there is also a civil investigation in New York by the New York Attorney General. He is also facing 2 defamation lawsuits by 2 women who have accused him of sexually assaulting him. Those investigations